Welcome back to The Breakdown. I'm your host, Nate Pike, and tonight I want to kickstart our return by setting the record straight on a few things. So yes, I will be reading again. I've said it before and I'll say it again. One of the biggest goals of this show has always been to make Alberta politics accessible and understandable for as many people as possible using any means necessary. That has meant using commentary, satire, humor, and although it's been a while, occasionally puppets. The foundation of a healthy democracy is a well-informed electorate. And historically, that electorate has been primarily informed by journalists. Because we hold journalists and the practice of journalism in such high regard, and because we use humor as much as we do, or at least we try to, we have historically gone out of our way to make it clear that we have believed that what we do here isn't journalism. Because of the attention that the show has experienced since the launch of the $6 million lawsuit against us by MHCare and its CEO and owner, Sam Mraiche, the type of content that we produce has come under significant scrutiny. And there's been criticism that we're practicing journalism, but pretending not to. It is for that reason that after 6 years of producing content, we are moving away from actively taking a position on whether or not we're journalists. And we'll be leaving that up to you, as the consumer of our content, to determine for yourselves. We're confident in the ability of you, our audience, to make the determination as to what our content is for yourselves. We're going to continue to try and produce the same well-researched content and commentary with the same goal of making complex issues accessible that we have been pursuing since day one. What you choose to call it or us is entirely up to you. Moving on from there. As you're likely aware, the show was recently subject to a court order that resulted in our content being made unavailable. And there are a few pieces that came out of that situation that I want to set the record straight on. The first is the unintentional publishing of a person's home address. In the course of researching our episode on the skybox photo, we acquired publicly accessible records, including publicly accessible corporate records that we relied on when we produced that episode. Those records have played a significant role in determining the ownership of the Alberta Surgical Group, which is a group that owns some of the publicly funded but privately owned and for-profit chartered surgical facilities operating in Alberta. We shared those records to demonstrate that there are clear overlaps in the interests of the owners of Alberta Surgical Group, MHCare, and former employees who worked in procurement for Alberta Health Services. What we didn't realize when we published those records was that those documents included the home addresses of some of the owners of those companies. We have since taken steps to remove or redact that information from our content. And while I maintain that no laws were broken and our intention was not to cause anyone any distress, the owners of that group of companies have made it clear that in the course of the recent court proceedings that our publishing that publicly available information caused them to experience fear. Again, the information that we published was public information available to any Albertan. And there have been no claims that the way that we acquired that information or that publishing it was a violation of any laws. That being said, for anyone who did experience any fear or distress as a result of us publishing that publicly available information, I want to issue a sincere apology. I'm not doing that because of external pressure, but because what we strive for here at the show is the pursuit of the truth as best we can, and causing people or their families any degree of fear has never been, nor will it ever be, one of the goals of this show. Furthermore, on any given day that the show is in operation, we receive literally thousands of reactions and comments across our social media. It is impossible to completely police the comments that we receive because of the sheer volume, and we largely rely on the policies of the various platforms that we post on to ensure that no hate speech or threats are made or sustained. To try and catch the nuance of every single response to one of our posts would be like driving down the highway at speed and trying to read the license plate of every single car that you pass as you go, while still watching for what's coming down the road at you next. In the run-up to the recent court proceedings, it was brought to my attention that someone had posted an inflammatory photo on one of our posts regarding what has now become known as the corrupt care scandal, which, by the way, just isn't a great name, but it appears that the NDP are committed to trying to make fetch happen. I want to be clear. As soon as I was made aware of this post, I removed it from public view through the breakdown. I want to be absolutely clear. This is unacceptable, and it's a clear, implied, if not explicit, threat of violence. While the breakdown uses what some have called guerrilla media tactics, we have never used violence, and we absolutely do not condone the use or even the threat of violence. In fact, to be entirely honest, one of the hardest things for me about the recent court order that silenced me from speaking publicly about any of these issues and topics was the fact that it was the same court order that prevented me from condemning this post or any other alleged threats and harassment. Please, do not post anything like this in relation to any breakdown content. For our audience, if you see something like this, please report it to both the social media platform that it's posted on and send us a message so we can do our best to try to mitigate its spread. Notwithstanding how difficult it is, I will try and moderate comments as they are brought to my attention or as I see them. That being said, I also want to be clear that I understand the very real anger that comes from feeling or being powerless. I spent the last 2 weeks having rights that are guaranteed to me under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms suppressed. I'm still very angry about that. I'm angry that the Premier's office allegedly tried to have me fired from my job as a paramedic. I'm especially angry about that because just a few years ago, I spent over a year fighting my way back from a PTSD diagnosis to recover and get back to the job I love. And because I dared to criticize the government of the day, they allegedly tried to take away that accomplishment, my livelihood, and my ability to provide for my family. So you had better believe I'm still very angry about that. I'm angry that asking questions about how taxpayers' money was spent puts a target on my back and a $6 million lawsuit over me and my family. I'm angry that instead of her taking responsibility for the roles that Danielle Smith and her staff played in removing guardrails designed to prevent undue influence on and by government, the current Premier of Alberta has instead only been blaming the organization that she is ultimately responsible for, after she personally tore down the firewalls to prevent government interference with the express stated goal of gaining even more influence to allow for even more government interference. I'm angry that the Premier and others are pretending the medication purchases and the surgical contracts were just bureaucrats being bureaucrats when they were both the direct result of ministerial directives. So here's where I return to my most Albertan of metaphors. Anger is combustible. If you aren't careful with it, it will burn out of control and destroy you, everyone around you, and everything you love. But as with any combustible, you can also use it as fuel. It can take you places, and it can sustain light even in what feels like the darkest of times. I made the decision that was how I was going to use my anger years ago. And today, that's how I'm asking you to use yours. Use it to push back and to fight back. But always remember that as bad as things may seem right now, we are still fortunate enough to live in a country where we have other tools to use to fight injustice. And the return of this show to what I'm certain is the great frustration of those who tried to shut it down, allegedly all the way up to the Premier's office, should be taken as a positive example of that. I'm also grateful for a lot. I'm grateful that we live in a country where we do not have to embrace violence as the only remaining tool that we have the option of using. I'm grateful for the support from all of you. I'm grateful for the kind words and the testimonials about how important this show is to you. And I'm grateful beyond words for the financial support. Albertans and Canadians have been far more generous than I asked or could have ever even imagined when we first launched our GoFundMe. That generosity has guaranteed that I will be able to use all of the avenues that our society provides to fight back in the right ways against the attacks that the show continues to face by the people who want to see us silenced. We will be getting back to our weekly roundups very soon, but I also want to let you know what to expect from us over the coming weeks. To start with, on Wednesday at 8 p.m., we will be rebroadcasting our Skybox episode. We've made some minor changes to remove the home addresses, and we won't be making available the original versions that included that information. We're going to ask you all to share this slightly updated version of that episode wherever you can, because we still believe that almost 6 months after it was originally presented, it remains one of the most important episodes that we have ever produced. One of the other unfortunate side effects of the muzzling that I and the show have experienced for the last 2 weeks is that it disrupted a project that I've been working on for the last 2 months, and that's been an extremely deep dive on the changes to the coal policy and the risks that reopening the Grassy Mountain Mine presents, not just to southern Alberta, but to the entire province. We've had to change our strategy with that project a bit, but we have several interviews that we are excited to present to you, and while we'll be presenting the bulk of them every Wednesday for the entire month of March, we're bringing you the first one this Sunday, because for me, it is without a doubt one of the most important conversations I've had the privilege to have on this show. So yeah, I'm thinking I and the show are back. Thank you all for being here for us to come back to. And I remain as committed as ever to keeping the conversation going. I hope you still are too. So let's all keep the conversation going.